Hey y'all, this is Sam with the Roots of Change podcast, and today we have Ashely Williams from Mind the Movement. How are you doing, Ashely?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so excited to have you today. We're really going to be digging into mental health and organizing and how we can do this work in a healthy and sustainable way and in a long term way. I know that you have been in the movement for some time. You've led national democracy and political programs. During the pandemic, I love that you hosted the largest political organizing training of all time with 60,000 people over 4 weeks. I can only imagine the setup of that and the relief of that being done. You also are a longtime vegan, an adoptee, and the only person in your family to graduate from college. And so with that, you started Mind the Movement, and I would love for you to kind of share a little bit about what that organization and that vision is.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for the introduction. So Mind the Movement is the first and at this moment in time only organization providing mental health support to grassroots organizers, campaign staff, and we're one of like two that are providing mental health support for former federal workers after the mass layoffs in 2025. And so what that looks like is that we literally will subsidize the cost of mental health care. Like we will pay for therapy, we'll pay for tribal care, whatever that looks like for people. We provide crisis training for organizations. And we also, a few weeks ago, or I guess 2 months ago now, started our peer support groups, which are so lovely. It's my favorite thing that we're doing. And those are spaces, whether it's like we have a group for men in movements, we have a group for people who are job seeking, we have one for former federal workers. So different sort of based on like their career, but also their identity. And it's just like a lovely space for people to come together and support each other.
Yeah, I can only imagine that kind of solidarity and being able to hear how everyone else is moving through organizing and trying to do that, but also hearing the struggles, I think can be very helpful for us.
Definitely.
What kind of take us through your initial realization and why you founded my.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't it was sort of an accident. I'd always say like I never meant to start a nonprofit. I don't recommend starting a nonprofit. I never meant to start a mental health organization. I am not a mental health professional. But so it goes back to 2024. So I was working at an international NGO that I was working on their US advocacy side, running a program for youth organizers and got the opportunity to work on the 2024 presidential campaign. And so I quit my job, which I actually didn't need to do, but I was just like, whatever, I'm going to quit my job. I'm just going to go all in and I'm going to go move away for a few months and work on the presidential campaign. And that was a journey. And I saw some things and I was like, why is this done this way? And why are we doing, and it's just, a lot of it just didn't really like make sense to me, but I was like, it's not my place to say anything. It's fine. So then, we get to the end and like the day after the election, pretty much everyone who didn't need to be in the office was sent away to go out and canvass. And so we came back, my team came back the next day. We were packing up because we were getting ready to go home. And there was a woman who sat a few rows in front of us, and we were like, "Oh, are you going home today too?" And she said, "Well, no, I can't. I'm going to wait for so and so on my team to get back because we're concerned that they're a danger to themselves and can't be left alone." And I was like, first of all, horrified that this young staffer who'd been there for like over a year was so devastated and felt so bad. But also I was like, who's like handling this? Like this is just like his manager who like is in no way prepared for this. And it just sort of planted the seed of like, this seems off. Like, why is there no like plan for one, mental health issues on such a huge campaign, which is essentially an organization that, pops up and then shuts down. Why is there no plan for after the election when everyone's about to be unemployed? And in the US, obviously, that means you don't have insurance or don't have access to good insurance that then pays for therapy. So all of these seeds were kind of planted in my mind of like, this seems not right. And so I went home. I'm now also unemployed, had a lot of free time. Was also, I have a history of mental health struggles myself and was like super depressed and was like laying in bed. And was, reading random articles in the middle of the night about the singer Noah Kahan, um, who I love and who talks very openly about his mental health and, like, if you're a sad person, like, his music is for you. And so I don't know, I just, like, couldn't sleep, so I was reading all these interviews and articles, and, eventually I read one that was where he was talking about providing therapy for his crew on tour. And so my first career was actually working in the music industry. So I really saw like the overlap between life on tour, life in the music industry, and like life on a campaign. This like short term, intensive, like you're not eating well, you're not sleeping well, and then it's just over. And I was like, oh, that's so interesting. How does he do it? So I did some Googling and eventually found an organization in the music industry called Backline that provides mental health support to people in the industry. And I always say, like, I wish I had, like, a video of myself seeing like, going to their website because it was just, like, a light bulb went off over my head, and I was like, "Oh my gosh." I was like, "This is exactly what we need is, like, something like this." And basically, like, the next day, I was just, like, obsessed with them. I reached out to them. I was like, "How do you do this? How is this structured? Tell me everything." And so now it's like I saw the problem of, like, the mental health issues that I was seeing, the lack of support and infrastructure, and a way to support it and do something about it. And so basically, I then spent a bunch of time thinking about like, okay, who's already working with campaign staff, who can support them, and I'm going to tell them about Backline, and I'm going to tell them why they should do something about this. And like for like a month, I was like, someone somewhere should do something about this, and I talked to everyone about it, and people were like, oh, that's such a good idea, but yeah, we're just trying to survive. And so then I was like, okay, I'm gonna do some research. I'm gonna make the case. I'm gonna get data. I'm gonna give them a reason to understand why this is important. So I did a survey of 2024 campaign staff about their experience and how it's impacted their mental health, and actually got like over 200 responses. And that then caused me a lot of anxiety because I was like, I'm not a data scientist. Like, what do I do with this? And again, it was just like a little flustered. So I didn't look at it for like a couple months. And then eventually it was like, okay, people fill this out. I now have to like do my part and look at it and look through it. And the stories that I heard were just shocking. Just, a lot of severe mental health issues and suicidal ideation and addiction and people who are struggling more than I could have imagined and just so many of them. And so then I felt this like deep sense of responsibility of like, okay, I am now the holder of these stories. Like I have to do something with them. And so I kept again for a couple months trying to make the case of someone should do something. This now I have this good data for them and stories and they can work with it and they can fundraise. And over that time, what happened was I met with an organization called All Due Respect, who works with grassroots organizations and studies working conditions and then makes recommendations for how to improve working conditions for grassroots organizers. And then I was like, "Oh, man, this isn't just a pain problem, this is also in, like, movement organizing and justice organizations." So even though they have more continuity in their work, they're still often under-resourced and struggling deeply. So I was like, "Okay, well, whatever comes out of this is gonna be campaign staff and grassroots organizers." But then what also started happening was the mass firings of federal workers, like hundreds of thousands of people like walking out, their industry is destroyed. They have, they didn't know they were not going to have jobs. And the Washington Post published an article about, in the early days, a couple folks who were like considering suicide, one person who already died by suicide, people saying like, well, I still have good life insurance, so let me die now and get my family that money. And I was just like, whoa, 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 this is unbelievable. So then I was like, okay, we got to include the former federal workers too. So it expanded to those three groups, and I'm still trying to make the case for someone somewhere to do something. It was not supposed to be me. And then basically to fast forward the story a little bit, it became clear no one else was going to do anything. And I put out this report and got a lot of good, feedback, and it went a little viral in certain spaces. And I was like, well, I guess I'm the someone who's gonna do something. And so between like May, which is mental health awareness month, and like July, basically, I learned everything I could about how to start a nonprofit, and which I had never done before. That is not my lane, that is not my world. And I did it. I started a nonprofit. And so, yeah, so like we had all our sort of legal stuff in place in August of 2025, and then we officially launched in November of 2025. So basically, like a year of like having the initial like this is bad to like actually being able to start helping people.
Yeah, that's amazing. I thank you for that full story. And it feels like a long time, but that's a really impressive way to stand up an organization, and especially one that is needed right now. Like, it's been needed. And I think, you're touching on so many different things. And one of them being that when we do this social change work, the idea is that we're helping others and we're forgetting about ourselves. And that is not how we help others. Like, we have to put our mask on first so that we can have that agency and that strength to be able to do that work for all of us.
Mhm, yeah. Well, and I also think that people who choose to do this work do it for a reason, whether it's because they're personally impacted by the issues that they're working on or the results of an election. But I also think, okay, I don't have proof of this, but I have this theory that the rates of like mental health issues in people who choose to do this work are probably a bit high because we're people who pay attention. And if you pay attention to what's going on, it affects you, right? It might cause depression, it might make you anxious. You're gonna feel something, and some of us then choose to, like, do something about it in our careers, but, like, if you're a person who's paying attention in the world, like, that has an impact, right? And so I really think, like, the through line of, like, wanting to do, social justice work and also having mental health issues, like, I feel like there's a lot of connection there.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I think, like, there's also, like, the racial component, there's, like, the white supremacist capitalist patriarchy of it all, If we're doing this work, because usually it's because we've been impacted or we've had our people that are close to us that are impacted, and I think, when you touch on, like, the societal piece of it, I've really done a lot of reframing of mental health for myself and, like, the larger society in the since really the pandemic, since COVID-19. Um, you look at it as like a social issue because how can you stay sane and healthy in a world that is not either?
Mhm.
Um, to me, if you are reacting in those ways, then you probably are more tapped into reality.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
Depression is something that happens when you feel like you don't have control. Like, that makes sense. Like, Donald Trump and his regime have been very explicit about these tactics to make us feel this way, to make federal workers, I can't remember what the phrase was, but it was just like cause a lot of pain for
Yeah.
federal.
Yeah. I can't remember, it was like they wanted them to be in like, distress or something. I literally have this in a report somewhere, but yeah, they literally, like, were like, "We wanna, like, torture these people so they never wanna do this work again," basically, was the gist of it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and as difficult as that is, I also see that as like that means that our work is working. And that if they have to go after the emotional piece, like, they don't have a leg to stand on, and that's where your work is so important, because for us to do this, we have to have that community, and kind of I always think about it as like a basket. Like, if we don't have a basket in our organizing, we're not supporting each other and we're not gonna move together.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like you said at the beginning, you do have to put your own mask on first to, like, survive. But we don't heal in isolation, right? I feel like I'm using a lot of, like, cliche quotes from, but it's true, right? Like we're meant to live in community with each other and we're so isolated. And I was reading an article the other day about like students in college who like literally don't speak to each other. And eventually are not going to really know how to speak to each other properly, right? And it's like that is so, you know, unnatural and not how humans are meant to live and or organize or, solve problems, right? You're not supposed to just sit by yourself and like go like this and like and yeah, helping people like find spaces to support each other is really important. And that's part of why we have our peer support groups to like, because like it's hard to like make friends and it's hard also like at work to know who you can trust and who you can talk to. And so sometimes that means joining curated groups like a support group or a book club, or I'm about to join a thing in my neighborhood where they like match you up with a pen pal who's like in your neighborhood. And I'm like, so, and then at the end of like 3 months, you meet each other. I'm so excited. So I feel like we don't know how to like be in community anymore. So sometimes you got to go to like these curated options.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I won't touch too much on that, but that's definitely something I've been thinking a lot about this year, especially. I think, like, with Trump's election and it being, 5, 6 years after the start of COVID-19, I've been thinking a lot about how do we rehumanize in a way? Like we are disconnected because of tech, we're disconnected because we've lost third spaces. There's so many reasons from a capitalistic and white supremacist reason for why we're disconnected. And it does take time to get that reconnection. And so there is kind of that pain in the process. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about like the peer support groups and like and the survey of like what were some of the things that were coming up for staffers and for government workers and like how are people moving through those?
Yeah. So some of the things that we saw across the board in the survey, which was just for campaign staff, and that was um this sense of like heavy responsibility of the results of their work. Um, and, you know, that election cycle didn't go the way, mind the movement is nonpartisan. So I try not to say like we and us, but like most of the people who filled out my survey probably, are on a particular side. And didn't, it wasn't, 2024 wasn't a great year. And, that sense of like we failed, therefore they personally are now under threat. There were some, organizers of color and trans organizers who were like, I am not safe to go home. Like people know that I'm trans and I worked on this election. Like I'm scared. Um, so like really this feeling of like it was personally like their fault in a way that like things went the way that they did. And I think that surprised me, and it's funny because like, I felt that way too, but, like, I didn't realize other people did. So, yeah, that sense of, like, this is our fault, and every bad thing that happens is because we messed up was really heavy. There was also a lot about, not feeling safe in the work environment and sort of, like, toxic work culture, which is, like, a whole other thing, like, toxic work culture, bad management, being afraid to speak up, being afraid to report things. Since I did that initial survey, I've had so many conversations with people who've had really wild experiences. And I talked to one person who is working on a campaign with a candidate and helping them do call time, which on a campaign is where you sit there with a candidate and they like call people and ask for money. That's like a big part of what they do. And the candidate wanted to stop and go do something else. And this person whose job it was to get them to do it was like, no, we're going to go another like 30 minutes, whatever. And the candidate hit her
Mm,
and, like and I'm like, "What?" Like, that's so unbelievably unprofessional, inappropriate, illegal, whatever, and all they did was just, like, transfer her to a different role and, like, expected her to just, like, go on. And so, just really, like, shockingly poorly run organizations was, like, the main sort of, like, overarching theme of, like, the mental health survey. Um, and just really high rates of uh, anxiety, sleeplessness, surprisingly high rates of self-harm, disordered eating, stuff that again I wasn't expecting going into it, but seemed pretty prevalent. Um, and then in terms of I feel like I'm missing one of your questions, but in terms of like the support groups, what those look like. So we spent a couple of weeks training folks who wanted to be facilitators. So we worked with an organization called Give an Hour that's been around for a long time, that for like 20 years, that leads support groups and now trains people to lead support groups. So it's called Trauma Informed Peer Support training, and then there was like a facilitator training was the second week. And so we trained folks, some to take it back to their own organizations and then some to lead groups for Mind the Movement. And so each group is a little bit different. So each one, has a facilitator who then, the first call with their group basically like says like, this is your space. And like, we have some like across the board, like norms and community agreements, but like, let's create the space together. And so they work together to decide on what norms they want to follow for that group. And then some are a little bit more structured. Some will have like a little like homework, like here's your prompt to think about going into next week. And others it's just like come and like talk about whatever you need to talk about. And so they're all different and we're like 2 months in right now and there's sort of their own little worlds are forming and I in them, so I just hear back about them, but they make me so happy, and our men's group in particular is, like, my absolute favorite. I think, that was not one that was on my radar at all of, like, there being a need because, like, I'm not a man, but, I had so many conversations with guys about sort of mental health in these spaces, and they were like, "You know what we need? Like, a space just for men," because, like and what one person said to me, he was like, "Listen, like, I'm a straight white male. I realize, like, I have so much privilege, but I'm also doing this work. I wanna be helpful, but I also don't feel like I can complain about my stuff because it's not," and they have, like, some really, like, mixed, complicated feelings, and I was like, "Wouldn't have thought of that." So by popular demand, we started this men's group that is just, like, so sweet, and, like, they're all, like, supporting each other through, like, really big stuff, and, um so yeah, it's really I think it's really lovely, and, I think your other question was about, like, sort of what's maybe kind of what's happened with the folks who from the survey, but it was an anonymous survey, so I actually don't know how people are doing, which if I could go back, maybe I wouldn't make it anonymous, but I think it allowed people to speak freely. It's such a small world that, like, we know some of them. So, yeah, so it being anonymous, like, wasn't great for follow-up, but was helpful to get really honest answers.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, thank you for that. I it's hard to hear those, how people are feeling, but it echoes a lot of my experiences in organizing. I traveled across, the Southwest for the 2024 election, so I definitely experienced a lot of, like, safety issues of, like, I am a white-bodied, feminine-looking person, and when you're in Trump territory, it doesn't really matter. Um, and so I think, it's something that we just have to bring to light, and have those conversations. And really, I think what you're naming is this, like, doing social change work is complicated. Like, no matter what your identity is, I sit in between worlds because I'm Native Latino and I'm also white and I have a ton of privilege. And so it's like, how do you balance that? Because we all are humans, we all have bodies, we all need to take care of ourselves, while we're learning and while we're growing and while we're supporting the most vulnerable populations and as we, like, really actually create lasting change. Uh, and so I'm really loving the men's group. It's reminding me of, some of the native men's groups that are here in the Bay, and it's just, like, it's so heartwarming. I talked to one of my friends yesterday, and he lost, like, 80 pounds, and he's been doing this amazing work, and it's all from just, like, making that community connections and finding that rootedness in where you are and the work that you're doing. Uh, so yeah, I think, like, I wanna kinda transition to some of the, like how do managers and leaders think about this? But I also want to acknowledge that what you said about organizations, campaigns, like, ultimately a lot of these are built under the capitalist structure, which are harmful and are not actually supporting mental health or even thinking about that part of our lives.
Mhm.
Uh, so yeah, what would your advice, like, what's coming up in terms of, like, how to support, how leaders can think about supporting their staff and team?
Yeah. It's hard, like, I totally, see all the reasons why people don't support their staff as humans, right? And, like, Mind the Movement is specifically talking about mental health, like, in air quotes, but, like, that's really just, like, supporting human beings and, like, you know, the sort of, like, um like seeing your staff as people. So and it's so hard because I think the work is so big. There's so much to be done and organizations, social justice organizations, movement organizations, campaigns are so under-resourced and they have to do so much with so little that like there's so much, work and goals and things put on individual people on, like, really small teams, and so I think that's, like, problem number 1, right? And that's, like, maybe even, like, a step outside of, like, the people running an organization is, like, the people funding the organizations, and, like, that's a whole other conversation about, like, who funds it and how it's funded and all of that, but, like, investing enough money so that an organization can be well-resourced, so that they can hire enough people, so that one person isn't doing 5 people's jobs, right? So that's step 1, investing in, like, training and development of leaders and of managers. I think that's a huge gap is, like, new managers who got promoted just because they were good at their job does not mean they know how to, like, support and lead other people, and I think managing and leading are 2 different things. Um, so there's that, and then I really think it just part of this and part of our, um, digital campaign for May was called, like, "Unmute Yourself," and, like, starting the conversation about mental health, and I think that's, like, the first step, right? Like, you can't jump from, like, "We don't talk about this. This is not a reality that we know about," to, like, implementing structural change without, like, starting the conversation, and that was sort of the prompt is, like, "Let's have, like, a baby step. Like, let's dip our toes in." And so I think, like, starting to have the conversation, right? Like, if you are, a manager of running an organization, but have to report to a board or, a foundation or whatever, like, you may not have the authority to make big changes, but you can start bringing it up and naming the thing. And then what I also like to talk about is, like, practicing the worlds we wanna live in. And if we wanna live in a world where people are fed and well and have access to healthcare, and I think mental health is part of health, if we want that externally in the world, why don't we practice it internally in our little worlds, right? Like, and so that, and I know that's like the hard part is like how do you implement that and how do you systemize that and operationalize it and pay for it and all these things. But to at least start thinking about it, right? Like, what would it look like? What is our ideal for, like, the world, and how do we practice that within our teams and within our organizations?
Yeah. I love the baby step approach. That's definitely what we do at the Roots of Change Agency because I think a lot of times people feel very overwhelmed. It's like this is a big issue, and it is. It is a large systemic issue that has been around for centuries. So it's not like one individual or one organization is going to solve it. Uh, and so I think what you're sharing is like, how do you hold on to the agency of like, I personally want to change and be healthy to the wider of like, then how does that work on the community level? I think a lot about, like how you talk to yourself is also sometimes how you talk to other people. And so
Mhm.
if you're saying like, hey, like I talk to myself all the time, I'm like, you've got it, you're doing great, like keep going. Because, if we're not doing that, then like who else is doing that for us? Because when we start doing that, then we're going to do that for other people and we'll spread that out. And then we're showing more than just telling. Um, so, do you want to explain a little bit more about unmute yourself? You teed me up for my next
Yeah.
question.
Yeah, so, that's pretty much what it was. It was a digital campaign for Mental Health Awareness Month where we, put out a couple different toolkits for, one for people who are people managers for how to, like, operationally, start having conversations about mental health and start, like, bringing that into the workspace, which, like, you've maybe never done it before, you're concerned about, like, legal issue, like, can we ask people how they're doing, right? Like, all of that. So we kind of walk you through steps there. And then the other toolkit was for people who are not people managers, who's just like a staff person who maybe has some mental health issues or is seeing stuff going on in their team that they want to bring up, and like how to do that in a sort of a, work appropriate way. And that's, probably starting by like looking back at what was already provided to you probably when you got hired that like you didn't really pay attention to, but now going back to that and like how to have those initial conversations and like how to do it in a way that's not going to result in like outing yourself or someone else of like a serious issue, but then also what do you do if there is a serious issue? So that's also one of the things that we talk a lot about at Mind the Movement is sort of that like crisis preparedness of like what to do if someone's having a mental health crisis or a substance use crisis and how to support people through that. And we like everyone who facilitates with us, our board, everyone has all done like suicide prevention training because all this started from a crisis like that. And so that's really important to me that people have those skills. And it's literally like the same as like you learn how to do, CPR, not because you'll probably ever need it in your entire life, but like the one time you're the person who's like, oh, okay, this is happening and you know what to do could save someone's life. So that's a really important piece to us. But yeah, the Unmute Yourself campaign was just about speaking up and like starting the conversation and encouraging other people to tell stories. About their experience with their mental health and how their work has impacted them. So we did like a story collection campaign, which is still on our website if people want to share their stories. Those are really helpful to help make the case. And yeah, it was just kind of a fun little acronym that we came up with to help prompt people to have these conversations.
Yeah, I love it. It's like direct and straight to the point of like it builds agency too, and that's, what we're all about at the Roots of Change Agency. And yeah, that so just to make sure, like, those toolkits are still available on the website, people can grab those whenever.
Yep. Yep, they're
So,
still there. Yeah.
yeah. So we'll definitely in the show notes, we'll link all of that. We'll link Unmute, we'll link Mind the Movement. So if you guys need that, just jump right into the show notes. I would love for you to just share, like, you touch on the suicidality and like how to approach that, and I think that that is incredibly important, and I would love to offer some tips now, because I think, just to set that up, like, we're talking about balance, and, when people are having mental health issues, like, you wanna preserve that agency for them, because at the end of the day, we are people and we can make our own decisions. So how do you balance that with supporting people who do need that mental health support?
Yeah. How do we as an organization, or, like, how should people in general?
How should people in general, like, what are some of the tips that you have from your organizational resources?
Yeah. So I should preface this by saying again, like, I'm not a mental health practitioner, but I will share also for you to put in the show notes some links to organizations and trainings for from people who are. But so we all went through some the QPR training through the QPR Institute, which is a suicide prevention training. And that stands for question, persuade, and refer. I feel like refer is like the wrong word really to use because that sounds like clinical. But so like question, like thing number one is like to ask people directly. And that's like I think one of the hardest things is, not being like, oh, are you okay? Are you, are you but like literally saying like thinking of hurting yourself? Are you thinking of killing yourself? Are you, literally directly asking the question is like tip number one. And there's like data on like why you should do it that way and all that sort of thing. So thing one is to just ask the question if you're seeing certain signs. Thing two is in the QPR framework is to persuade. So persuading folks, if they are experiencing whether it's suicidal ideation or thoughts of self-injury or, even like a step below that where it's not like a full-on crisis, persuading them to get help. And then the refer part of that, I really feel should be more like, I don't know, recommend or research or something, but it's like helping them actually find the support that they need instead of just being like, oh, it's so great. You're going to do something about this. Here's a website link. Like, go find someone who's going to help you. It's like actually doing it with them or for them. Um, I think anyone who's struggled with like depression knows like your, executive functioning that may be normally very, very high just kind of goes out the window when you're struggling. And the thought of like, calling a number or like emailing a clinic or things like that just feels so overwhelming. And so like someone actually sitting there and doing it with you is really helpful and actually can be the thing that saves a person's life. And then, sort of the next part of that, if someone is actually in a crisis, is to basically stay in contact with them. And if you're, physically in the same place, stay in the same place with them until they are in the care of like an actual professional.
Yeah, I really appreciate you sharing that, because it is a hard conversation to have. It's I think, speaking from my own experience with my mental health, it's like balancing again that agency, making sure that people feel that they can make their own decisions while also not being afraid to ask those questions and not being afraid to reach out and go into that territory that, society feels is a little bit hard. Like, we don't touch the emotional piece, we don't touch the mental health piece, but I definitely encourage people to ask those hard questions and to not put so much weight on the results and the outcome, but just trying to do your best, and listening to that person in terms of what they need.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that all the different, sort of crisis trainings talk about is, when you ask someone directly if they're considering suicide, I'm gonna not word it correctly, but basically anything, how do they say it? Anything other than a direct and clear no is a yes. And so if it's like, "No," but, like, I'm joking, like, "No, haha, of course I wouldn't know. You're no, what are you saying? No, of course. Oh, no." That that you should take as a yes, and I just wanna, like, put that in there if we're, sharing these sort of, like, initial steps, like, and, if someone is not considering suicide, they're gonna be like, "No, I'm definitely not. I'm okay. Here's what I am right? Like, it's gonna be clear, and anything that is not clear, you should assume is a yes, and you should, like, move on to the next sort of what to do next step.
Thank you, and we'll definitely link those resources. To start kind of transitioning out, I know we've had a I've been really enjoying, and there's like a lot more that we've touched on that we could just go deeper in. But I'd love to just, we've talked about the managers, we've talked about the leaders. What about the newbies, people who are coming into this work, who are ready to go, who are passionate, they want to create change? Like, what is your advice to them so that they can make this a long term passion?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's so interesting. I think younger people coming into this work, and obviously not everyone who's new to the work is necessarily young, but young people coming into this work, I think are very like, people say a lot of things about like Gen Z, but like they're good at asking for what they want. And we've seen that with like unionization on campaigns and things like that. And even just like asking for like a day off a week, which was like unprecedented a few years ago and like before the pandemic. Um, so I think, and so for anyone who's new to this work, no matter what their age is, I think one, coming in with, like, your eyes open of, like, this is really hard, like, this is really hard work, and it's going to be, and, like, you may not be entering into a space that is set up to, like, support your well-being, and, like, you're probably not gonna have all the, like, nice benefits that, like, your friends who work in corporate America have and, like, 6 weeks of vacation or whatever, right? It's not gonna be that, it's just not. And so, like, no, going into it and saying, like, "Okay, if this space is not set up to support me, what can I do to support myself? What can I create with my colleagues?" And that's one of the other things we talk about in our Unmute Yourself toolkits is like creating those peer spaces with your own, within your own team and like, you know, not assuming that anyone else is going to provide that for you. And so like how can you take care of yourself? And, whether that's like penciling, time where you're just like, I'm offline and like I'm unreachable and I'm going to decompress or I'm going to go for my mental health walk in the day or I'm going to ask for accommodations to be able to work from home or whatever that is, like taking, responsibility for yourself, I think is a good first step. But then also going in and like asking those questions and like looking at the materials you get given when you're hired of like, what is actually available to me? There may be free mental health support or wellness support that I didn't know about. So like actually looking at those things. Um, and then, yeah, I feel like I'm repeating myself a lot, but I think it's just like being willing and brave enough to start having these conversations because we can't address anything that we don't acknowledge. And this is kind of a new way of thinking. Like, and that's been, for the last year, I've been trying to like beat this drum and like have this conversation. And people, the more senior the person, the longer they've been in the work, the more I just get like blank stares where they're just like, just suck it up. Just do it. Like, and I'm like, I love the like burning candle. Like, part of why we love this work, right, is it's intense and it's like feels so like you can love that and you can say like this is our this is the culture of our industry, but also like we don't need to add to it by doing, X, Y, and Z other things. So I think like really like starting to normalize that like we need to care for our own people too is a really important step. And so I think like being brave enough to be the person who raises those concerns, it's something that I've done over the years, like long before this, and hasn't always gone well. Definitely, made some people mad along the way, but like I'm so glad I did it because I need to stick up for myself or stick up for somebody else or whatever. And so I don't know. I think people have to be willing to be brave and have hard conversation.
For sure. Yeah, I really appreciate that because you're speaking some experiences that I've had as well. It's always fun when you're trying to create change within social change because there is that kind of disconnect of like, well, we are creating social change, and it's like, yes, we actually have to change the way we do our work. We have to change the systems. I think about, Tupac. It's like we got to change the way. It's like we got to change the way we treat each other. We got to change the way we eat. Got to change the way. It's like we got to change. Like that's on us. That is our responsibility. And if we're not changing, then is the rest of the world changing? Like, why are we doing this work in the first place?
Mhm.
So I really appreciate that, and I'll also just up level some of the Roots of Change Agency's resources as well. We don't have explicit mental health resources, but we do our private podcast. We have like ongoing tips and support. We're definitely going to up level your work and make sure that people can find you. And we also have kind of organizing and planning resources, and those are designed to make your work easier and more streamlined and more fun and creative. Because I think when we take out the serious part, sometimes we can build a lot more creativity and more expanse and capacity with our work. And then like the last thing before we kind of get into some of the fun questions is like community. You were speaking to the fact that you might not have leadership that is supportive of you, especially if you are of a marginalized identity. So, how are you getting that support elsewhere? Do you have that in your family? Do you have that in your immediate community? Do you have people that you can reach out to and say, like, I feel bad right now and like it's going to change, but right now I just need someone to acknowledge that, you know?
Yeah. And I think, I had a friend years ago who I live in New York City, so there's everything here, right? Like if you wanna go to like trapeze class at 2 o'clock on a Thursday, you probably could. If you wanna eat a certain type of food, it's all here. And this friend of mine lived in a small town in Indiana, and she was like, okay, well, we met at like adult sleepaway camp. That's a whole other conversation. But she was like, you guys have all the like yoga and you have all these things and you have all these classes, and I don't have any of that and I want that. And I was like, "Well, maybe that's because 'cause you're the person who's supposed to start it." Right? So, like, if you want these things to exist, like, maybe you're the person who starts it on your campaign or within your community, and, like, it sometimes sucks to be the person who's like, "Okay, I guess it's me," but, like, it might be you, right? Like, the person if you're noticing the need for things, you're probably other people are probably seeing it too, and, like, you could be the first person that says, like, "Hey, who else is seeing this?" And, like, "Let's do something about it together." So that's our lot in life as being people who are paying attention and who are, like, awake to what's happening is like, "Okay, guess we're gonna work on that too."
And you actually teed me up perfectly for the next question, because I saw that you're a vegan, and I actually started a vegan cooking business because I was annoyed that there weren't a ton of good, healthy vegan options. So I have Casa Chavez now is vegan, sustainable, plastic-free cooking, and I'm cooking for the community, and it feels so good and so rewarding. But I'd love to hear kind of what your healthy food tips or like what do you love about being vegan?
Okay, so what I love about being vegan. Aw. Okay, so we're recording this in 2026. This is my 30th year without eating meat, and in October, it'll be 17 years since I have been vegan. Um, I I love so many things about being vegan. It's, like, honestly one of the things I'm most proud of in my life. I grew up in a really small town in upstate New York where in the '90s, like, where, like, maybe you could get, like, a really bad veggie burger at the grocery store, but definitely at a restaurant, it was just, like, french fries and a salad, and, I was so shy and so quiet and so sheltered, but even then felt didn't even know or I couldn't explain, like, supply and demand, and, like, I remember not eating meat, and people were like, "One person not eating meat isn't gonna matter." But I was like, "No, I think it will," and I couldn't explain it. And, I'm really proud of, like, that I stuck up for my beliefs at such a young age um and stuck to it for all this time when it wasn't easy. And again, I don't live in New York City. It's super easy now. But yeah, I love that like I know that I don't spend money on things that are directly funding cruelty to animals. For me, it's an ethical issue about the animals. Then the more you dig, the more you're like, you see the environmental impact and you see the way the workers are treated. And most workers are immigrants and like I always say we will never have true immigration reform in this country as long as the meat industry exists because that is their labor that they like abuse and like can, you lose a finger work the next day because there's no repercussions, right? So it's all so interconnected and so yeah, that's I just love that like I'm not participating in that and that I, when like a story comes out about, some like animal abuse thing at like a farm or a dairy company or whatever, I'm like, well, I didn't participate in that. And knowing, and this sounds weird, but knowing that I could like look an animal in the face and be like, I would not hurt you is really meaningful to me. Um, in terms of healthy things, so I definitely am not always like the healthiest vegan because um again, I live in New York City and there's so much good food here. And like, I was just thinking, I was like, oh, maybe I'll go to Brooklyn and go to this bakery and get like a pie made and like maybe a slice of cake. So, not always the healthiest vegan. Yeah, I, I don't even remember what your question. I have no healthy tips, but I think like I also, do a lot of like physical activity. So in the last few years, I've really tried to like get into like sort of the order in which you eat food and how that affects like your blood sugar, and that for me has been really helpful. Like I was tired all the time, and now that I like start my day eating vegetables and then like high fat and high protein sort of like in this set order has actually been really helpful. I used to be super into like juicing and all that stuff, and I go through phases where I still am. So totally recommend all those things, but I also think like the beauty of vegan food, especially now, is like you can eat like the exact same meals as other people just without the animal.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you for that. I couldn't agree more, and yeah, there's just a lot there. Uh, so the last question that we always ask people is just like, how are you staying rooted these days?
Yeah. I saw that that was gonna be one of the questions, and I was like, "Oh gosh, I'm not gonna have a good answer." I feel like I feel like you wanna, like, say something, like, so deep and profound that's gonna, like, inspire people, but or at least I do. But, you know, this week in particular, like, I've has been, like, a not good mental health week for me, and I'm like, I feel like I should not be giving anyone advice for how to stay rooted, but I think or even saying what I do, because what I do is probably, like, sleeping, but, when I'm feeling better or I should just say even when I'm not feeling great, physical activity for me, it's, like, so cliche and, like, I hate it to be like, "Movement is good for you," but, like, it really for me, like, I just heard your dog bark. I used to have a dog, she was, like, 17 when she passed away, and so every single day we were going on long walks, and now that I don't have her anymore, like, the massive drop in physical activity really affected me, and so now I try so hard even when I'm, like, barely functional and barely, like, getting out of bed, I try to at least, like, go for a walk around the neighborhood, and, so that helps me to stay grounded, and, I also, I figure skate, uh, which is a thing I started doing right before COVID, and now it's, like, taken over my life, and when I so that's I think that's my thing that I do that helps me to just clear my mind. You can't be on your phone, you can't be thinking about work, you have to be totally present in what you're doing, and it's also, like, in New York, very, like, communal with, like, other adult skaters, so I have this, like, whole group of friends that, like, we don't even know what each other does for a living, so yeah, so that's what I do, and I guess if I had to, like, give tips to other people, it would be, 1, all the cliche things about movement and how it, helps the chemicals in your brain work better are true, but also, like, having random activities and things that you do outside of work that bring you joy, as you talked about, it's so important to make things fun and joyful and, unserious and, find those spaces where, like, the problem solving part of your brain can, like, be turned off for a little bit and you can have joy, and sometimes when I'm, like, skating and doing things, I'm like but at the same time, like, all these bad things are happening, and, right now there's a lot going on with, like, ice in New Jersey, which is, 30 minutes from my house, and it's like, it is such a privilege to be able to afford to be able to go and do an activity and to take the time to do it. So feel like, what are we fighting for if not for people to have joy and to, be in community and, like, I think it's not like an either or, I think it's like a both and I think we need to have joy to make the work sustainable, and so that's how I justify it for myself, but I also for other people, I'm like, if we're all miserable, right? If we're just, like, suffering through this, like, what are we fighting for? Just, like, lay down and let it happen, right? Like, we have to fight for that joy and, joy is resistance and all of that, and so to me, that's, like, I don't know, helps me to not feel bad about, like, taking time for myself is, like, for it to be sustainable, for me to be alive, I have to have these other things too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I appreciate that, like, full spectrum too because, like, Yeah, we have really bad days. We have bad weeks. We have bad months. Like, I really try to give myself a lot of grace in those moments to just be like, what did I do today? I walked out of the house. That's a big thing.
Yeah.
Uh, and I think I do some of the walk. Sometimes I force myself to go walk when I'm really grumpy, and I'll, like, play up the grumpiness until I've gotten it out because
Yeah.
I'll just, like, verbalize it. I'm like, "Oh, I'm so grumpy," blah, 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 and then it helps because then it just kinda dispels it a little. Uh, and then the last thing that I'll share is, one of our kind of organizing principles at the Roots of Change Agency is make the revolution queer resistible, which you don't have to be queer to do that. It's just queering life. Like, how do we make dance part of the revolution? How do we make music the way that we resist? Like, these are all things that we have historically used. Food, like, I started Casa Chavez for that reason because food is revolutionary. So I think, it's really helpful for us to reframe that when we look at social change because so much of the time, like, the mental health stuff is so much about, am I doing enough? Am I getting enough? And it's like, that's always going to be the case. And we always have to hold ourselves accountable. And we are one person, and a trickle can lead to a waterfall. So if we're putting that in, we can all put that in. So with that, I would, can you just share a little bit more about where you can find your work? We'll of course have everything in the show notes, but just so people can continue to follow and find Mind the Movement.
Yeah. So it's just mindthemovement.org, and we have a Substack and LinkedIn and an Instagram. But mindthemovement.org is where you can go and join our support groups. And if you need mental health support, you just fill out a form, and you can apply for our mental health subsidy that, again, we literally will just like pay for your care. Like, we have like onboarding calls with people, and at the end they're like, that's it. There's no catch. And we're like, that's it. Like, let us give you money. So yeah, that's the main place to go.
Ah, okay. I can't wait. I really hope everyone checks that out. It is so, so needed. So thank you so much, Ashley, for all of your work. And with that, I hope everyone stays rooted.
Thanks, Sam.